Okay, so this is where we need to pick up from last lecture. We're looking at carbohydrates, and this is particularly. Let's just kind of back up one slide. We're working with polysaccharides. Poly is a word that means many. It means many. You'll see it. You'll see it poly times, many times. And saccharide means sugar. So that just means it's a polymer of many sugars bonded one to the next to the next. The first one that you're looking at is starch, which we find in potatoes and rice and bread and any kind of a flour product is starch, is what it amounts to. So biscuits and so forth. So you'll notice you just have glucose bonded to glucose bonded to glucose bonded to glucose. But they show you the oxygen on here, and there's a reason that they do that, because if you'll notice, all of these glucose units have the oxygen on top. And what that really tells us is that all the glucose units are actually oriented right side up. They're all in this same, oriented in the same direction. And in this case, they're right side up. You could turn them over, but in this case, they're right side up. Glycogen is the same way. Now, that's what we store in our livers, glycogen granules in muscle tissue, but also we store a great deal of it in our liver. It's just a storage place for sugar. If you, for example, didn't have breakfast and, we go to about 1:30 today, by that time you're going to be pretty hungry. You will be pulling out some of the sugar off the glycogen and releasing it into your blood in order for you to be able to think correctly and function. So glycogen is a sugar storage, and we do run on sugar. We do run on glucose. So it's a place that we can pull out individual sugars and release them if we need that, which occasionally we do. I don't know about you, but occasionally I miss a meal. And the last thing you're looking at is what's called cellulose, and that's the primary component of cell walls in plants, and they do put that in here. Cellulose, microfibrils in the plant cell wall. Gives it a very rigid structure. You can see that there are several little fibrils, and each one of those is just made of many cellulose fibers. So then we have a cellulose. But if you'll notice on this, every other cellulose is upside down. So this one, the oxygen's on top, and on this one, the oxygen's on bottom. One is on top, one is on bottom, so every other one is flipped. Now, because it does bond like that, every other glucose flipped upside down, we cannot digest it. So we have talked about that. That's called fiber. So totally non-digestible. It's a good thing to consume. It does clean out your intestinal tract. Pull away the fat. That's where you tend to absorb any number of things like fats and preservatives and dyes and many toxic compounds that, in the concentrations of the foods that you're eating, they say that that's totally safe. Well, okay, in that concentration it's totally safe, but once it begins to build up in your intestinal tract, it dissolves and accumulates in your wall of your intestine because it dissolves in the fat. You get really high concentrations of it, and it does irritate the wall of the intestine. What you end up getting there is any cell that's irritated over a long period of time doesn't like that, and it tends to stay inflamed. And if it stays inflamed for a long period of time, it can actually alter the DNA structure, meaning that you can turn on what they call proto-oncogenes. Now, these are genes that are cancer genes, but normally they're in the off position. They're not turned on. And we have a whole bunch of them. But different things can actually flip the switch and make them turn on, and all of a sudden they become cancerous. So in this case, if it's irritated for a long period of time by having say, dyes absorbed into that, and, I don't know, you eat foods with dyes in them all the time. I'm a jelly bean freak, so, I eat lots of that. So I better eat lots of fiber and clean out that fat, because I don't want my intestines to be irritated for long periods of time and end up with a colon cancer, because that's not going to be good at all. For one, you can die from it. For two, you can have a colostomy bag, which you're not going to want. and if nothing else, they may just snip out part of it, which means you're going to have surgery. And the surgery in and of itself is really not a horrible thing. It's the anesthesia that will get you. That's the one that can mess you up, particularly as you get older. You know, I've known people who were older that were in perfect mental condition that went in to have some simple operation, and when they came out, they were just it's the anesthesia. So you just do not want to have an operation if you can avoid it. I do know anesthesiologists. I don't think they're called that now. I have one who's a good friend. So, and she'll tell you, absolutely, do not have any operation unless it's absolutely necessary. I hope I never have to. I have a friend who's going into surgery this morning. I just found out last night late. She has 3 aneurysms in her brain, and if one were to burst, she would die. And she's going into surgery this morning. So, you know, she will hopefully come out of it okay. I'm a bit upset about that. A very, very good friend of mine. And she's, I think, 69, so she's older than I am. But I have many friends older than I am, and many friends younger than I am. I have friends your age. You know, I'm not ageist. I'm not a person who thinks that age really matters. So, nothing does to me. You know, at all. I'm wide open, really. I'm very liberal type of individual. So no, I'm not ageist at all. All right. So they do talk about polysaccharides are usually hydrophilic. Sugar's hydrophilic. That means water-loving. You know, you can dissolve sugar in water. Water is polar. Sugar is polar. So sugar will dissolve in water. Well, polysaccharides are made out of sugar, so sure they're going to dissolve in water. You can put a cracker in water and leave it there long enough, it will dissolve. You can put bread in water, leave it there long enough, and it will dissolve. Now they put lots of other things in breads and crackers too, but the polysaccharide part, it will eventually dissolve. It'll take it a while. Back talk about that being made of cellulose. And then, of course, you just let that water dry off or put it in the dryer or whatever. So very water absorbent because of that. And so this animation is not going to work for us. She was here yesterday, and I didn't even think. Our textbook rep was here. I didn't even think to ask her about that. What a moron I am. I'm sorry. I should have remembered that. Well, we were real busy doing something else yesterday afternoon. Anyway, 8-week semesters are kicking our butts. I'm sure they're kicking yours also. We're all in the same boat. We go home and cry at night. Morning. Check it. Make sure it's okay. Yeah. I know. Here, come here and get my lab book, just so that you can check it, and just make sure everything's cool. The water bath, I'm not really sure it's going to go up to 100. So, you know, you can put maybe a metal bath on there with a Bunsen burner under it, or a couple of them on stands. That'll get to 100. Yeah, well, lab is at noon-ish. Right. That's cool. We got her done. I think it's done. Just check it. I slammed. I think we got it. But yeah, it's like, oh my God. I get here and it's like it hit the fan again. I just showed up. It's already hit the fan. I'm crazy. But anyway, it's cool. It all works out for the best. God doesn't give us more than we can handle. I do believe that. And we do learn from all of it. So it's all good. It's all good. It's good to be challenged. I am up for a challenge, absolutely, all the time. Never say die. Say, I'm gonna take this brother Bob and I'm gonna kick its butt. Always, always, never say die. Stay with it, hang in there, and come out on top of it. That's my motto. Just my motto is whatever it takes. Actually, that is my motto, my personal motto. Whatever it takes, I'm in. I'm down for that. Whatever it takes. And this morning was a wild ride. It was crazy, but anyway, I'm coming down off of that. Oh man, I'm so good. I'm so amazed at how fast sometimes I can work. It's like, what? Did you just do all that? Really? That's crazy. Anyway, lipids. These are fats, oils, waxes. We've mentioned those before. These are non-polar. So obviously, oil is not going to dissolve in water. You put a chunk of butter in water, it's just going to sit there. It'll float right on top. It's just butter. It is non-polar. And we'll talk about that. Long-term energy storage, so that's what we store on our body. I'm starting to gain weight for the first time, and gosh, I don't even know. It's been so long since I've started to put on weight, and I don't know why. It is so weird. My body is so weird. It's like, what are you doing to me now? You're starting to put on weight. I guess I'm going to have to diet again. I'm gaining weight. That's scary. No, this time I'm like, I think I may let it just gain some weight. And then I'll get in the workout, and then I'll start lifting weights again. Put on a little mass, and then work that fat off. Okay, so fats do not dissolve in water. They're not polar, so they're hydrophobic, meaning water hating. To hate is phobia, phobe, in Latin. I have all kinds of phobias. Oh my gosh, I'm claustrophobic. I'm not about to ride that elevator, and it has gotten stuck 2 or 3 times already. Last semester, some people were in there for like 20 minutes for somebody to they could get it down. I'm just telling you. I don't ride that thing. I take the stairs. I'm phobic. That thing stops. Mid-floor. I'm totally freaking out. I hope there's nobody else in there because they're just going to be clawed to pieces. No, actually, what I'm doing, I always typically carry my bag with me, and my bag has medication in it. I'm just popping all these pills legally. They're all legal. They're legal. They have my name on them. So yeah, I'll just swallow a chunk of those, and I'll be just totally mellow, totally mellow. I know everybody goes, man, you're just like you really must take a lot of uppers. I'm like, nope, everything I take's a downer. I can show them to you. They're all downers. Can you imagine this without those medications? Whoa. I can, because occasionally I miss a medication, like a midday medication. I am flying. It's kind of fun. Okay, lipids. Long-term energy storage. So we store that stuff on our body as fat really fast. And the problem with it, it takes twice as much energy. Well, it contains twice as much energy, which means you have to burn twice as many calories to get it off. You have to work twice as hard to get the fat off. Instead of saying muscle or the sugar that you stored, you're going to have to work even harder to get that fat off of it, off the body. So it's a tough one. Once you get it, it just is very tough to get rid of. And I have friends who certainly have that problem of putting it on very quickly and not being able to get rid of it. So I totally understand. And I love people who have like mass on their bodies, who are a little bit overweight. I guess I'm what they call them, chubby chaser. It's like I like you hug somebody like that, and they're all cushy. They're all cushy. Everything on them is kind of cushy. I think that is so cool. I'm just all bony, and they're just so cushy. It just feels so good. I like it. Sicky, I know, sicky. I've got so many sicknesses, they should just lock me up. All right. Okay, so lipids differ from all these others in the way that they're built. You know, the others are going to be like a monomer, bonded to a monomer, like glucose bonded to glucose, bonded to glucose, bonded to glucose, long chain of monomers to create a polymer. These don't do that. That's not the way they're built. They will, and they consider, these are the ones we're looking at, fats, phospholipids, steroids, which look completely different than the others. And the first one is just fat that we'll look at. Anyway, but they're built differently. This is what they have in them. They have a molecule of glycerol. Now, you have this PowerPoint, but, you know, write whatever you want. And you can print that off. So you can bring it with you. Or you could use your book. Some of you have that. That's cool. Mark in your book. You know, when I would ever go to a bookstore, I wanted to buy a used book, and I wanted the used book that had the most writing all over it, because I thought maybe they had something there that could help me. Very seldom did they. Usually it was like, what were they thinking? You know, oh my gosh, this person was really messed up, which was kind of became fun. You know, see how messed up that person was. It was like, what? They weren't looking at this just right. But anyway, occasionally I had a few good tips. Anyway, so you know, I always bought the ones that were most marked up. So anyway, a fat has a glycerol, which is a 3-carbon molecule, and you can see it's got these hydroxides on them, the OH groups. It's got 3 of those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bond these long-chain fatty acids, and that's what these things are. These things typically are somewhere between 18 to 21 carbons in length. It's just carbon to carbon to carbon to carbon. And they are completely covered with these hydrogens, completely covered. That means they're saturated. Saturated means as full as it can possibly be. It's like I have a nephew, and when he was this big, a little bitty kid, he wanted to have coffee with the adults, right? So we'd sit around the table. I've always had a second home. I like having a second home. And when I couldn't afford a nice home, then I had just a little low cabin kind of thing. But then, you know, the family would show up, and we'd do whatever. You know, just play card games and get together. Anyway, in the morning, you know, he wanted to have coffee with the adults, the older people. So he would get a cup of coffee and have the spoon, and it'd be have sugar in it. He'd put a tablespoon of sugar in there and dissolve that, and then he'd put another tablespoon of sugar in there and dissolve that. Put another tablespoon of sugar in there and dissolve that. Put another tablespoon. And there's a point at which coffee can only hold so much sugar dissolved. And any more spoonfuls that he would put in would just settle down to the bottom. It was saturated with sugar. It had as much sugar dissolved as it could possibly have. That was saturated. So in this case, saturated means you have as many hydrogens on these carbons as is possible. So carbon to carbon to carbon to carbon. So anyway, they're totally 100% saturated at this point. Thank you. Okay, super. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Oh, you know it is. It's all my favorite. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to bond this fatty acid to this fatty acid to this fatty acid to this. So we're bonding all of these fatty acids to these OH groups. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to pull out water. So like pull off this hydrogen and also an OH group. So I'm going to pull off maybe just this hydrogen and this OH group. And then I'm going to bond that carbon to that oxygen. All right. Or I could pull off this OH and this hydrogen. Either way, it doesn't matter. And bond this oxygen to this carbon. Same thing here. Pull off maybe that hydrogen and this OH group. Pull those out as water. And then bond that oxygen to that carbon. So what I've created is what we commonly call a triglyceride. Triglyceride is animal fat, and that's what we store. That's this stuff right here. I'll show it to you. I'm proud that I have some now, actually. It's like, I've got fat. Cool. Yeah. I I could be working out in the weight room, and they'll go, "Look at that fat old man." You betcha, I'm proud of it. Check this out. So we're pulling off the water, and we're going to bond this. Now this is saturated. That actually one of those hydrogens would be on the other side of that carbon, but anyway, this group that you have at the end of the fatty acids is called a carboxyl group. So if you go back and look at those functional groups, you've got a carbon double bonded oxygen and an OH. That's called a carboxyl group. This thing right here, carboxyl. So you've got a carboxyl group right here, but you're going to again take the hydrogen, or either way, but the hydrogen off of the, in this case, glycerol, and the hydroxide off the carboxyl. This is a dehydration. I'm pulling out water, which is dehydration reaction. And then this carbon right here will bond to that oxygen right there. Okay. So, and that would be a monoglyceride. The cool thing about monoglycerides, those are the best fats that you can consume. Things that are high in monoglycerides, that's the best fat you can possibly eat, would be, say, avocados, full of monoglycerides. Good to eat. That doesn't mean they won't make you fat. They have a lot of fat, monoglycerides in them. So if you eat a bunch of avocados, you can put on weight. But the fat is not going to clog your arteries. It's not going to coalesce. It's not going to combine with and form this goo, combine with cholesterol and form this goo called plaque, which is going to clog your arteries. And you don't want your arteries clogged, because if they're clogged going to your head, you'll have a stroke. You don't want one of those. And if they clog an artery going to your heart, then you'll have a myocardial infarction, which is a fancy name for a heart attack. You don't want one of those. Either one of them could kill you. At the very least, you could have major problems. So you want to consume fats that are very high in monoglycerides. That's really what you want to do. So if you cook with olive oil, very high in monoglycerides, very good to cook with. I know it's got a little bit of a flavor, but you get used to it really, really fast, very fast. So I cook with, if I'm going to cook, when I like to cook, I use the olive oil. It's pretty inexpensive. You could use avocado oil. There are other oils out there that are high in monoglycerides, but they're more expensive. But olive oil is not very expensive. You can get that. The who? Sunflower oil. I don't think it's too bad. I mean, I just have to Google it and see, how many monoglyceride, what's a percentage of monoglyceride in whatever oil. And then it'll tell you, of course, what you're working with. And a lot of people now cook with coconut oil, and they say it's really good for your skin. Some people like to bathe in it. They put it all over their skin, just kind of soak it up, sunbathe in avocado oil. Of course, the UV light, you're probably hurting yourself doing that. But I do like the sun. I'm a sun worshiper. I do like the sun. God gave us some wonderful things. Sun is one of them. Thank goodness. We got that one. All right, so here is a triglyceride. Now, notice one of these fatty acids, this one right here, has a double bond in it. Okay. Carbon can only have 4 bonds. So I don't have another hydrogen over here, because if I had a hydrogen sticking on this side over here, that would give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 bonds. It would actually have 5 bonds. It can't do it. So it can only have 4 bonds. So therefore, that one is missing a hydrogen. And because of that, you get this little crook. Whoa, that's not what I meant to do. All right, we'll back up. It's cool. All right, so we get this little crook. And because of that, then, if you had a triglyceride where you have those little crooks, It's an unsaturated triglyceride. It doesn't have as many hydrogens as you can possibly put on there. I mean, if you put a couple of more hydrogens on each one of those carbons, then you would have this carbon here, and this carbon here, and this carbon here. If you put another hydrogen on the other side of it, and instead of having CH1, you'd have CH2, then you would not have that double bond, and it would be a straight chain. So it is unsaturated. You don't have as many hydrogens as you could possibly have. Mono unsaturated fat is not bad either. That's not bad. As long as it's mono unsaturated, that's not bad either. All right. So the triglycerides that are saturated, those tend to coalesce and combine with cholesterol and tend to create that plaque, and that will build up, and you need to be sure and watch for that. And about 40, you go in and get your blood work done every so often, and they check your triglycerides and cholesterol, and then if it's too high, they'll say you need to take Lipitor. I don't take Lipitor. I take a combination of natural vitamins, and it works like a charm. It works like a dream. It brings my triglycerides and cholesterol not just to normal levels, but to below normal levels. And I eat like a pig. I eat anything. I eat, all just any Mexican food, and I hope it's just floating in grease. That's the way I like it. Just greasy, greasy, greasy. I love that. People are like, well, you shouldn't be eating that. I'm like, well, my numbers are great, and they stay great. I can eat anything I want. So, you watch your numbers, I'll watch my numbers. You're not watching my numbers, I am. So, people, they look at you like, man, you shouldn't be ordering that. No, you should be ordering the salad. No. So this combination is pretty cool. So anyway, here you have saturated fats, butter, and I got the steak, saturated fats. I have no problem. I cook with butter. I eat lots of it. I buy at Sam's like 3 pounds of butter at a time. Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't mind eating ribeyes. There's a ribeye. That's what that is. They're very high in fat, which means they'll be very flavorful. You want the marbling, you want the fat in there because that gives you the flavor. So, but you have to be careful. You got to check your numbers. At your age, your body's able to process the triglyceride really well. But as you get older, you may not be able to process it very well. That it kind of runs in families. So it kind of depends on your family line. But you'll know when you reach, say, 40, you go get it checked. You're going to know if they're high, then all of a sudden, and you can get them checked like once a year or every 6 months. And at some point, then it'll just go woof up if you're one of those. And you'll be having it, they'll want you to take Lipitor. There are better things to do than that. Anyway, so unsaturated foods, of course, they always want you to eat fish, which I hate. I do not like fish. I'm not a fish person, and so I don't eat that at all. I like ribeyes a lot. Anyway, I do cook with olive oil. I've gotten used to that, so I don't have a problem with that. Okay, notice this. For each 5% increase in saturated fat, there's a 17% increase in the rate of heart disease. Well, again, it kind of depends. You got to check your numbers. Look at this, a 2% increase in trans fat. Now, we didn't really talk about trans fat. Let's back up. Talk about a trans fat. Let's go back. Okay, so let's say that you've got, say, a fatty acid, and this fatty acid is totally saturated with hydrogen. Okay, so it's totally saturated with hydrogen. But what if we had a lot of double bonds in here? Then it would be unsaturated, and it would be what we would call polyunsaturated. Poly means many. So you'd have, the carbons will have much fewer hydrogens, so it's polyunsaturated. But what they can do is they can saturate that, and that is like taking an oil, and say you fry French fries in it, and then you pull those out and dump them out, and then you fry another load of French fries in it, and you pull them out and dump that out. You're saturating that fat, but instead of saturating it so that the carbons are found on equal sides like this of that carbon, they tend to form, well, let's do it on one down here. They tend to form like that. So it's a trans fat. And the bonding goes at different angles. And because of that, it tends to coalesce, bind with cholesterol at an even faster rate than even a triglyceride, a saturated triglyceride. You know, you shouldn't really those unless you're on my miracle. I can email it to you. If you want to know, just email me. Say, I want to know your vitamin regimen for lowering triglyceride and cholesterol. If you have parents or grandparents that are having to take Lipitor and you want to get them off of it, which it does damage your liver. And my mom takes it. I'm like, and I've tried to talk to her. I'm like, Mom, I've got something else you could do. It's not going to damage your liver. It's totally natural. She just follows doctor's orders. You know, she's of the generation that the doctor knows everything. I'm of the generation that I don't like doctors really. You know, I can read up. I know what's what. I'm not an idiot. I can figure these things out myself. I can go to WebMD. You know, it's all there. You got it at your fingertips. You guys know it's where you spend your world. So absolutely. But trans fats will bind with cholesterol at a faster rate and create a much faster problem. If you're not on the miracle vitamin cure, notice for each 2% increase in trans fat, there is a 93% increase in risk of heart attack. You don't have to know these numbers. Don't write this mess down. But it's just amazing. The point is, you don't want to eat trans fats. Well, what that is when you go to these fast food restaurants, and like I'm saying, I don't worry about it because my numbers are great. But anyway, they take those French fries and they dip them, and then they take another batch and they dip them, and they take another batch and they dip them. You know, when they're doing that over and over and over, frying like that, man, you're getting like tons of trans fat. It is horrible. And so, you know, I tend to eat at home. I'm not real big about going out. There are some places I like to go to, greasy Mexican restaurants. So I have a real, problem with that. I love them. The greasier, the better, for sure. But anyway, fast food. No. Although I am a freak for Taco Bell. I'm addicted. They put something in there. It's like, I gotta have it. It's like heroin, gotta have it. I've never done heroin. Amazing as that is, for sure. I know. I'm amazed at myself. Actually, I've managed to stay away from a few drugs in my period of my life. Like, really? You never did that? Well, I'm like, well, my life's not over. I'll wait till I'll wait till I retire. And I'll break it out. I don't know. I'll end up a crack whore at 80. Won't that be pretty? Oh, oh man, I'm bad. Okay, phospholipids. Now, we've already stated that 55% of a cell membrane is protein. Protein, 55% of the cell membrane is protein. Well, you got 70 trillion cells, lots of them. So you're made of a lot of protein. Plus your muscle is pretty much all protein, what little muscle I have. But, okay, you got 55% protein on a cell membrane. I call it, it's cell membrane. It's really plasma membrane, but I'm kind of old school. But the other 45% is really phospholipid. It's lipid. You have like the glycerol in 2 of the fatty acids, long chain fatty acids, and then on the other third carbon, you have some phosphate and some other things attached to it, and I'll show you that. So that makes up 45% of your plasma membrane. And that's what it really looks like right here. So you don't just have a phosphate group. That's what you're looking at here. This is your phosphate group, PO4. We've talked about that. Notice all those oxygens. They're electronegative. They tend to pull electrons to themselves. So they're really drawing electrons that direction. And they're getting it from this end. So we don't just have phosphate. We have a couple of carbons with hydrogens on them. And then we have this nitrogen with some methyl groups attached. So it's kind of a crazy big thing. But so what happens, we tend to pull the electrons this direction to that phosphate group. So what happens then is this phosphate groups end up being negative, and this nitrogen out here tends to be positive. So really, this phosphate end that contains the phosphate end of this phospholipid, it carries with it, it's polar. It's positive on the outside of it, it's negative on the inside of it where the oxygens are, and then your fatty acids are non-polar. They're not going to dissolve in water. But the polar region, this one will dissolve in water. So this is polar. So it's polar, which means it's hydrophilic, means loving. Hydrophilic. Philic is loving. And then these, of course, the nonpolars are hydrophobic. Will not dissolve. Oh, I spelled that wrong. Hydrophobic. Will not dissolve. All right. So that is going to then help us to organize a plasma membrane or a cell membrane, as I normally would put it. So that's very important. So this is the way they arrange. If you put them in, say, like water, which all cells have water on the inside of them, mostly, and to the exterior of the cell, you have mostly water. So the water's polar, whether you're on the exterior of the cell, whether you're on the inside of the cell, polar. Now remember, the phospholipid is 45% of the plasma membrane. PM, plasma membrane. Okay, so your heads are again hydrophilic, and if you notice, the most exterior part of that is positive, and the more interior part of that would be negative. And they call those the heads. So really, I'll put a little positive in here. That just didn't work whatsoever. We'll try that again. So we'll put positive there and negative there. So every one of these heads, which are the gray little egg-looking things, the exterior, more external portion would be positive, and the more internal portion would be negative. Okay, so those will, that means they're polar, so the heads will dissolve with the water. Now, the tails are non-polar, which means they're going to direct away from the water. So they direct towards each other. So you actually have 2 layers of phospholipids. So here's a phospholipid with a head and tail. The head is polar, so it dissolves with the water. And then the tails are 2 of these, 2 long-chain fatty acids. Those will be direct away from the water since they are hydrophobic. Same thing with this other layer. You have the heads in contact with the water, and these kind of yellowish structures, brownish, orangish, whatever you want to call these. 2 fatty acid, long-chain fatty acids, they're hydrophobic, so they tend to direct away from the water. So what you really get is what they call a phospholipid bilayer. 2 layers, phospholipid, bilayer. You get 2 layers, and that's what you find in the plasma membrane. It would normally do this if you had like a jar or a flask full of phospholipid and you poured it into water. It would normally form like a double bilayer. It would do this automatically. Just pour it into water. Automatically do that. You wouldn't have to do anything else. And it would form a sphere. You know, there are some of the books that are written will have chapters on how the cell came to be, how it evolved from just simple organic materials to a well-organized cell that had metabolism and could keep itself alive and so forth. And there are chapters that will tell you in books on how that actually is believed to have taken place. No one, of course, knows, but it's there's a lot of support in that, which it does make sense that would evolve. I kind of am one of these people that I believe in what I refer to as directed evolution. You know, God didn't just go, okay, poof, now there's a cell. You know, he put things in motion. He allowed these things to occur naturally at a rate that, you know, there would be a formation of a cell, and that would evolve into all these different cells, and then we'd evolve into multicellular organisms, and then that evolution process would continue, which is still continuing today, and so forth. So, yeah, I believe the cell evolved. We didn't, at one point in history, there were no cells. The first billion years of the planet's existence, there were no cells. And about 3.5 billion years ago, all of a sudden, there's recorded in the geologic record, you know, the first cells. So you had 1 billion years to evolve into a cell. And then since that time, we really have had 1 billion years to get to where we are. From the single cell, first cell, to where we are today. 1 billion years to get there. It's a long time, you know. Been a lot of evolution. And again, you know, if you don't buy into any of that, then that's cool. I am not one to say I have all the answers, and the way that I look at things is totally 100% correct. I'm just not one of those people. I'm certainly wide open to suggestion and to other ways of thinking. I'm not and nothing in my mind is in stone. Usually, well, most of it's usually kind of muddled up into kind of a goo. It's pretty gooey up there in my head. Everything's kind of gooey. But it is what it is. All right. So I just keep an open mind is what that really amounts to. Steroids are really very different. Steroids have a way different structure. They are lipids, meaning they're nonpolar. They're not going to dissolve in water. But their structures look a whole lot different than, say, a monoglyceride or a triglyceride. You know, that's very different. You have a glycerol with some fatty acids attached. They don't look like that. Steroids. Of course, steroids include the sex hormones or steroids, so that would be the androgens, which are masculinizing hormones. Basically, we know testosterone is going to be an androgenic compound. It's a steroid. The female sex hormones, and there are several of those, progesterone, and the list goes on. Estrogenic compounds are several, estrone, estradiol, there are several of those, and then we get into many others. Women are just full of hormones. I don't know how they stay normal. They look pretty normal. Look around the room, but I'm sure their heads are just exploding at all times with all the hormones raging through their bodies. I don't know how they manage. You know, the 28-day cycle that they go through, I'm like, what? How do you do it? I couldn't possibly, you know. My hormone level is just like below earth, actually, at this point, you know. It started here at like 15 and went up to, you know, at some point it peaked 20 whenever, and then it just went, you know, from that point to this point, it just went straight down. So, you know, I'm working on about 0 hormone level, at least sex hormone level. But male hormone level is a very keeps very steady, and at some point begins to decline very slowly. Females, this is just like crazy, up and down for the 28 days. So I think that would be very interesting. I'm glad I'm not having to do that. Last thing I want is a uterus. Thank you very much. I'm glad some people were born female, but I'm very glad I wasn't. Um, no, no way. And if there's a second life, I get to choose. I'm choosing male. I want to come back another male for sure. Y'all can birth, y'all can rear, y'all can breastfeed, y'all can have your 28-day menstrual cycles, have your uterine cramps and so forth, your PMSs and all of that goes with it. I just really do not want that. No. Oh, thank you. Anyway, so sex hormones or steroids, vitamin A, E, K, and D. A, E, K, and D. Those are steroid compounds. Vitamins A, vitamin E, A and E, K, which you very seldom hear anything about that one, K, and vitamin D. Vitamin D. You get that in milk or milk products like cheese. A, E, K, and D. Okay, and then there are, of course, there is cholesterol. That is a steroid also. It's a very common component in cell membranes, and we'll see that. So this right here, that happens to be, I believe that is cholesterol, that one. So if you'll notice, the basic form of a steroid is you have these 4 rings of carbons, 1, 2, 3, and this 4th one right here, 4 rings. And then you have these attached groups that attach. This is a hydroxyl right here, and then you have some methyl groups. So I've got a hydroxyl here, I have a methyl right 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 here. Lots of methyls and cholesterol. So that's it. But, your basic structure, these 4 carbon rings that you have right here, that's common. All the steroids have that in common. But depending on what's attached to that carbon, those 4 carbon rings, you get vitamin A, E, K, or D, or you get any of the androgens or any of the estrogens or, cholesterol, which is what this happens to be. So you're just changing up the functional group. Your basic structure is identical, the 4 carbon rings. All right. So anabolic steroids, those who take those, this is just kind of a warning. At one point, I'll be honest, of course I'm always brutally honest, at one point I was looking into taking anabolic steroids, and because I thought, I'd like to be all bulky at least once in my life. I've always been this puny little start taking anabolic steroids, and with like a month of time, they're ripped. In 1 month, they are totally ripped. I'm thinking, man, that'd be great. I'll get totally ripped in 1 month, and I'll take a photo, and post that on Facebook and, I don't know, Craigslist. No, I was joking. All right, but anyway, so but I seriously started looking for them and found some. I did find them, and the guy was like, "Sure, I'll sell you some." Absolutely. But the more I thought about it, and actually he even talked me out of it. He says, I'll tell you what. He said, all that you hear about steroids and the effects of, he said, it's all true. He said, absolutely. And he was very nice, I have to admit. And he was basically a distributor. And it's illegal, of course, but he talked me out of it, and I'm glad he did. I wouldn't be the scrawny thing I am today had he not. Violent mood swings, depression. Who wants that? Mood swings, I mean, you slap around a girl every once in a while. What's the deal? No, I'm just joking. That's not even funny. Not even funny. Not even funny. It'll get you kicked off the football field for at least, 2 games, at least 2. Anyway, liver damage, oh, you don't want that. Without your liver, you are really messed up. Cancer, oh, that would be fun now, wouldn't it? Let's think about that. No, it wouldn't. High cholesterol, high blood pressure, no. None of those are good things. Okay, so we finally get to proteins, and we are done for the day. So take a little bit of time and I would have to Google it.